for September 19th, 2017. Are we properly posted, Lynn?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Opportunity for citizens to speak with the committee. No citizens are here. So we'll move on. We have some action items and some review items of first readings we've already had. So let's take the action items first. Approval of the policy minutes from our August meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'm so moved.
Second, Barbara and Greg seconded. Do we have any changes to the minutes? None seen? Then I'll, all in favor of accepting the minutes as is, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay, then we do have three action items, items under the action item section, dealing with a number of policies that we would like to be taking to the board for the first reading in October. And I'd go through those for you right now. The first one is we've seen for some time now the policy 3112, board staff communications for professional staff, and 4112, board communications for staff, support staff. We have, on this item, we have rewritten it based on some prior committee and board discussions that we've had. And both of these are worded the same. We have added a sentence on the bottom. Further, all employees who engage board members with the intention of making disparaging, defamatory, and/or false or intentionally inaccurate statements targeted at their direct supervisor, administrator, or another employee will be subject to disciplinary actions. All employee concerned should follow the procedures laid out in the outlined in the employee handbook. Barbara?
Remember this particular policy. I'm sorry, is this a new policy?
No, this is not a new policy. This was part of the approved policies back in February that were vetted by the work groups and then presented to the board.
But I'm wondering if it was before we started this whole process.
I don't believe that this policy was in our book
You're right,
prior to.
you're right. And so I know that, you worked with Neola. Is this just a common policy item?
This is a common policy in I can pretty confidently say in the 160 school districts that utilize Neola. This policy is specific to Waukesha through all of the discussion that we've had. The most recent discussion is the underlying components that you see in the policy under Section 1 and Section 3.
I just, I'm just not real comfortable with it. I just feel that I want people to be able to speak with us. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to. I've never discussed anybody's evaluation. I mean, nobody's ever brought their evaluation up to me. But, sometimes they have things that bother them, and I think it's okay for them to say so. I don't know, this is like it was in my high school. So I guess you need to justify why we have this.
Well,
This doesn't squelch people talking
Well,
to us, Barb.
I know it doesn't, Joe, but it does.
But this last point is basically talking about when they're talking to you, they should not be coming up and be essentially presenting false information that defames someone. That's
of
just
course
wrong,
not.
period. I don't.
I mean, it's common sense.
Right. So, I mean, from my perspective, that's how you should be treating everybody.
Well,
So I don't know how this really restricts people from talking to us.
Well, I think it's discouraged. I really, really do. And I really don't want to tell people when they call me or speak, I can't talk to you because, or you can't talk to me. It really is bothersome to me. That it's a little,
Have to say that.
well, I just don't like anything in our policy that inhibits people.
Well, the only thing that it's inhibiting is talking about their performance,
Well, that they don't do.
right?
Yeah.
That's
I don't think that that's a common
They can.
common thing. Well,
And it has
but they don't.
happened.
Well, I'm not aware of that.
Well, it has happened.
That's too bad.
And so that's really the only thing that we're restricting is discussion about their performance, because we're not the people that are evaluating them, and we should have them go through that process appropriately.
Well, it's not entirely their performance, because they could make a disparaging remark about somebody else that they shouldn't be doing.
Of course they could.
Right, right.
But that's
Yeah, I was speaking
that's the real
specifically
world,
to
you
the
know?
one.
first
Yep.
part. Okay, thanks,
Yep.
Joe. Joe Cook.
I would just say that the policy is written to govern all of us in the district, from the superintendent and cabinet through our organization, so it applies to everybody. The importance of the policy, I mean, any policy that governs all is written so that it covers our day-to-day operations and really covers everything that would fall into the realm of common sense. The policy needs to have language in it that allows us to address situations where people use poor judgment and speak disparagingly of others, or go to a board member to talk about their performance evaluation. And the importance of the performance evaluation piece is you are the governing body that ultimately hires and fires staff, from administrators to teachers. When the discipline comes down, the Board of Education is the final say on that. And if staff go to you with those concerns and you weigh in one opinion or another, and then that follows a disciplinary situation and you sit in as that governing panel, that jeopardizes the board member's position in that debate. It also limits our ability as administrators to address staff that speak disparagingly of others. This language has been discussed more extensively than any of the policies that we have in our book, including the field trip policy that we spent 2.5 to 3 hours working on in a work session. We've had this policy on, for debate 3 times through the approval process, back in, I believe it was December, January, and February, and then we've discussed it 3 or 4 times over the past 3 or 4 policy and board meetings. So this has been thoroughly vetted by this board committee. It's also been discussed by the full board. And I believe at that point, there was a feeling that it's important to have the language written the way we wrote it. I remember Mr. Dietz speaking, extensively about making sure that employees could come to you to talk about general things. And we've spelled that language out. And so that's the reason that the policy is here, because there are times when staff have reached out to individual board members, making false statements about their supervisors, and absent of any language in policy, it makes it very difficult to address situations like that.
Where did you say that, you know, what Greg's, oh, I'm sorry.
So I just want to point out that in the very first sentence, it is okay to informally discuss educational trends, issues, innovations, activities. Those are the normal conversations that we typically have when we run into staff members or a principal or someone, a teacher. I mean, those are usually the conversations that we typically have with them. And so I just don't see this as being restrictive in a great manner. There are a couple instances where it's restrictive, but that's it. Everything else is pretty much you can talk about.
Barbara?
Well, the most common thing that, you know, that teachers say is, oh, I've got 30 kids in my classroom this year. I mean, that's very common. But I don't want them to read this and get their own opinion that, oh, I guess I can't mention. That's a real common thing that
They can talk about
teachers
that.
say, yeah. Or I got 50% of my class is comprised of special needs kids and it's very difficult. Those kind of things.
Not restricted?
They can talk on that too.
Well,
What they can't say is they can't say, well, they can't continue the conversation and then start to, like, say some nasty things about Joe, who's in charge of special education, and then start to spread rumors about, something. Those falsehoods shouldn't, those discussions shouldn't be taking place. But if you're talking about factual things, I have this type of, my class makeup is this, and that discussion should be fine.
Amanda?
I think it's,
Yes, thank you. Barbara, is the concern the statement that says doing so may result in employee discipline?
absolutely.
Okay,
And there could be a misunderstanding with that.
Okay, so then, Joe, is there, and obviously without details, have we had to implement the possible
We've had-
disciplinary action?
We've had situations where if we had specific language to discipline on, we would have looked at discipline for some of the things that
some
were
of-
said.
Okay.
Correct.
So
So
it's always, there's always a may, pretty much in any situation, right?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. I would say that based off of our behavior as an organization and our past behavior, our past practice has been good communication between our staff and the members of our Board of Education. I would say that with probably 99.9% confidence that the conversations that are had with board members would fit within the scope of this policy. There are some unique situations that come to board members where employees are speaking disparagingly, specific to their supervisor, that would, I believe, in any other profession, result in discipline or termination based off of the process that's used. And absent of a policy that allows us to address those situations, what do we have then?
Well, Joe, I would be foolish if I thought when I was a principal that somebody didn't rag about me. I mean, that's unrealistic to another teacher, you know, maybe somebody outside the building, you know, but they did. Even though I had, and Greg was a principal when I had a wonderful relationship with my staff, but did they ever complain? I can't believe that they didn't. So I don't want that to stop. So I can't support this, but that's.
Any other comments, or this is an action item, so I would be accepting a motion?
I did want to point out one thing that may or may not influence Barb here, but in doing, it says in doing so may result, and you were trying to point that out, Amanda. It's not a shall. Shall is, it will absolutely result in a disciplinary action. This is just saying, if it goes to a point where the appropriate administrator believes discipline should happen, it allows them to do that. So essentially what you do by not agreeing with this is you don't really allow your staff to be able to properly discipline. I mean, that's.
Saying I wouldn't be able to discipline my staff, or I would be, I don't get it, what you said.
This takes any bite away from people defaming other people. I can say whatever I want about you, and nobody in the district can do anything about it.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way life is, isn't it?
Well, I'll tell you what. If you start spreading rumors at GE Health about another GE Health person, I know there are policies in place that would get rid of that employee.
Yeah, I just.
Absolutely.
We've had it, you know, we've never had anything like this for 1,000 years, and now all of a sudden, we're telling people, oh, you know, we're gonna spank you. It's okay, I just
Okay.
don't go along with it, and.
We have a motion and we have a second. Greg?
No.
If it's something that would be true. I mean, I think they still can do that.
I hope
Talking
so.
about false statements.
Correct.
And I looked at probably 20 other districts in our area that have the same policy, and this is the most staff-friendly policy of anyone that I looked at out of 20, because we've changed it and added some things that I think most of us felt were important. So I think with those changes, I think I feel comfortable supporting it.
The other thing that I'd add to this, if I could, is this policy applies to me and what would be my relationship with Todd.
Yep.
I couldn't call you guys as board members and talk about the superintendent in any way that would address his performance as our superintendent of this school district. And this isn't just a policy that applies to teachers, and it's not just a policy that applies to support staff. It's a policy that applies to all employees of this school district in how we would treat each other when it comes down to making disparaging and inflammatory comments. And that is an important piece to have in there. Having been on the receiving end and been mentioned in emails from staff to board members, I know what conversations I have to have after that happens. And it's important, I believe, to have this in policy. And I do believe I have the support of other administrators in saying that. And I would think that if staff knew that this applied to all of our administration, they would be in favor of that as well.
Thank you. Would- Barbara?
In the first paragraph, it makes it a little softer if we would be able to say in the last sentence, all employees are expected to follow, all. So then, to me, that really specifically says it's everybody.
Well, it is all, there's two different policies. One covers all the professional staff, and one covers all the support staff. So that's everybody. Okay, at this point, I think we will take a vote. All in favor, please, we need a roll call on this one. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, it's right. Please, would you take a roll call?
We need a motion first.
Oh, I thought we had a motion. Oh, the motion was on the minutes, I'm sorry. Did you move, somebody move? Moved by Joel?
I'll move.
Is there a second? Seconded by Greg. Okay, now we can vote, right? Is that what you're saying, Lynn? Yes. Does it have to be roll call, or can I do? No. Okay, all in favor of accepting the revisions to policy 3112 and 4112, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
4-1 in favor. Thank you. Okay. The next one is revision to policy 6510. And, excuse me while I get my page turned here. This is one, I spoke to Lynn about this because I didn't understand it. But quite simply, there was no longer a need for the bottom paragraph where employees could choose how their payroll, their paychecks were going to arrive. They will all, and they are currently, all arriving twice a month, period. And that's really all we did here. So is there any discussion on the change we made? Payroll? Apparently not. Then I will seek a motion to approve the revision to policy 6510, payroll authorizations.
I move to accept the payroll authorization as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Greg. Any further conversation on this topic?
Yes, I just want,
Yes.
you know where it came from is, at one time, they would say to some employees, you can get your paycheck divided through the whole year, or you can have what you still have coming at the end of the school year. And that, that used to be an option, but now it is, that was a lot of work.
That's been changed.
Yeah, it's been changed.
Okay, we'll now vote on this one. All in favor, please, for 6510, please say aye.
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 Opposed? 5-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
And the next is a revision to 9700, relations with non-school affiliated groups. This is an existing policy, and if I can find my place, it's under outline number C, top of the page. This was brought up at the last board meeting, correct?
Correct. There is, Todd and Sue Ettinger get a tremendous amount of requests to advertise and distribute information. And so the language, and I do apologize for the copy, the language on the top of the third page in this states, due to the time and expense of reviewing and improving materials to be distributed to students and to minimize the amount of time in distributing materials by staff at our school sites, only those not-for-profit organizations that have a bona fide partnership with any school or the district will be considered for distribution pending the approval by the superintendent's office. Other organizations' materials, if approved, will be placed on the district's website bulletin board. There's a lot a lot. I can't even begin to say how many organizations request us to send out individual flyers to kids and to families. We want to be able to, help facilitate that, but to review all of it, it does take a tremendous amount of time. So the policy will allow us to, if it's approved material, it will just go to a general location on the district website where families and community members can go look at it. Otherwise, if we do have a strong partnership with an organization, just using as an example the swim club, we would be able to then distribute information for them.
Joe, there's also a colored item on the next page, near the end there, number 4. Was that an addition?
That is an addition.
Okay,
And it does address, potential conflicts of interest,
right,
and then using your classroom as a marketing location.
right. Barbara?
Yes, can we move on to F?
What?
Isn't there EF, On the third
Point
page.
4,
sale of school supplies?
yep.
Is it okay if a school sells ice cream at no profit, like during the lunch hour?
No,
It's not okay?
no, it's not. I mean, that would be against the food. Anything that is sold during the lunch period has to be approved through the food service, per the
Really?
federal food laws.
I did that for
Yeah, you-
13 years, nobody told me.
Yeah, you can't do anything
You
that would be.
can't.
You can't do anything that would be in competition to the school lunch program during the lunch
Well, it wasn't
period.
in competition, it was after lunch. You couldn't buy ice cream before lunch.
It's all new.
If it would be in conflict of the food service, that would be something, again, that would have to be investigated. But if it's in conflict with the food program, you can't do it.
Go ahead, Joe.
I don't think that those laws existed back.
Oh, no, it
When
didn't,
you
it
were-
didn't.
yeah,
But that
we
doesn't
didn't.
mean that some school doesn't sell ice cream at the end of the lunch hour. So
Vending machines can't be turned on
we didn't
during
have
the,
them. Right.
some places have vending
Yeah.
machines. They
Yes,
can't
they
be
do.
turned on in cafeteria locations.
Yeah, those are older kids. But elementary kids, we didn't have vending machines, thank God. But, yeah, we used to sell
Amanda?
ice cream.
So how does that apply to the student groups that sell the smoothies or, other things like that? Is that a different approval?
It's a different approval,
Okay, good.
under, student fundraising.
Okay.
And again, those still have to be approved under the guise of the food service policies.
Oh, so that's separate though.
That would be a separate from this.
Well, then wouldn't selling ice cream be, it was a student project. I really didn't do anything with it. That's not a student project.
I can't speak to selling ice cream at the schools if it's a student project or a student fundraiser. Anything that, I can speak to anything that happens in and around the lunch hour does have extra scrutiny through the food service process.
If it was after school, that'd be a different issue.
After school would be a different issue. If you're selling cookie dough for the football fundraiser, that would have a different set of rules on it. I mean, it is cookie dough, but it's not being distributed during the school day. I mean, all of that has a different set of rules. This is really talking, this is talking about sale of school supplies. So if I have my own notebook company, I'm not using my classroom as an avenue to sell notebooks to students. I'm here acting as a staff member.
Okay, right, Amanda?
All right, I have it going
Oh,
back.
that's okay.
To the other
Top of page 2?
page 2, yes. So this new paragraph, Joe,
Yep.
what makes a not-for-profit organization a bona fide partnership? How does a group have that partnership?
That,
Does that make sense? Sorry.
that does make sense. I don't have a specific answer to that. I do know that if we were looking at past practice and history, we do have some organizations that we worked closely with in the past on partnerships. Swim Club would be one of those. Those avenues could be spelled out in administrative guidelines that we would be developing after this policy change would be approved.
Good point, so maybe we have Todd's rules, right?
Todd's rules, correct?
So,
We could just have kind of a feedback later that would indicate that this has been addressed.
right, because some groups, it's like, oh, they just always have been a part, you know,
I think
well, always has been, doesn't, you know.
Yeah,
The, it's listed under Todd's rules, not under a specific policy. If we're gonna say, then you need to be a bona fide organization, then how do you become, how do you get that partnership? Because, in this section A, I believe it says, the distribution of materials or activity proposed by this outside organization shall be reviewed by the principal based off the proposed activities. So to me, that says the principal can make a decision, yes or no. So one principal can say yes to a group, the other principal can say no, and then,
I think that there's different levels here.
Okay.
Level item C, distributing and posting of literature. This isn't materials and activities or contests and exhibits. This is that third section there, distributing.
Right. No, I see that.
Distribution and posting of literature. And so we do get a wide array of requests.
yeah, I'm sure
And
of
so
that.
the language here is to put a little bit of control over where that needs to go. Now, if you're not a bona fide partner and it's approved, then it's still gonna get listed. It's just gonna be listed on the district bulletin board that would be located on our website, provided it meets the criteria in items 1 through 7. It's just not something that's gonna go out to the individual student backpack, which is what a lot of the requests entail. So it's a good question to look at how do you become a bona fide partner to the school district? I'll take a look at that with Todd.
good. Anything else on this one? Joel?
Yeah, Joe, have we had an issue with the last point on the last page, number 4? Have we had any employees trying to, sell goods or things like that?
Not that I'm aware of, but it's not to say that it couldn't happen, and that's why it's proposed. When these requests were coming in this past year, I was looking at policy language from other districts, and Todd was reaching out to superintendents in other districts. And I think his counterparts in other districts had item number 4 come up as an issue, but it's a good catch for us
Sure.
to have in our policy.
Yep. No, I agree. I think I think it strengthens it, and it's commonsensical actually. So.
Okay, this is an action item, revision of policy 9700. I'm seeking a motion for approval
I'll move to approve the revisions to policy 9700, relations with non-school.
by Greg,
related groups.
seconded by?
I'll second it.
No, second it. Joe seconding it. All in favor of any further questions? All in favor of approval of revision to policy 9700, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Those are the items we wanted to get covered tonight to take to the board meeting for first reading in mid-October. We have no information items, but we do have, again, grouped 3 things under the first reading that was held in September of 5 different policies. We read at the board meeting in September. We would like to just quickly review those to see if there's any further changes. They went through the board meeting quite simply, and we would be taking them back for approval full approval at the October board meeting. I think I got that all straight. Okay, revisions to policy 3440, job-related expenses, and 4440, professional staff and support staff. Quite simply, this has added a paragraph about the Internal Revenue Services travel rate per mile being in effect, and that is put into effect in July. That will be the rate we will be using. That's on the first page. And then further down on the first page is telling the staff to get them turned in on time. That's basically it. Any things need to be changed on that? If not, they'll take them to the board meeting for the second reading and final approval in October. Okay? Personal communication device, 5136 and 5136.02. First one is personal communication devices, and the new policy, 5136.02, on cell phones. If you'll recall, this was really taking 5136, extracting the cell phones from that and giving it its own policy, which allows us to restrict or eliminate cell phones from the classroom. Yes?
Just a question, is this addressed for students, or is it students and staff?
This is a student-based policy, and we've implemented, just to share, we've implemented this practice. And a number of our staff that work in this building have children in the district, and their children, particularly at the high school level, have come home already and said that they're tired of hearing from their teachers and their principals about cell phones. So the message is out there that your cell phone should not be out in class.
right.
So we have noticed, if you remember back, we had the discipline session back in August. I have been monitoring our technology infractions, and they are up substantially. So it's a policy that at the classroom level is being enforced as well, so.
Good. Amanda?
Just for clarification, so when this had just come out, I had some conversations with parents, and for the most part, everybody was agreed, saying, it's a distraction in class. But then you have that other group of people who's like, heaven forbid there's an emergency, I need to get a hold of my child, and it's just how the world is now. This is not saying that they can't have it, it just cannot be out and being used.
Yeah.
It can be on their person, it can be in their backpack, it just better not be out while the teacher's talking.
During the
Correct.
45, 50 minutes of class, the cell phone is to be put away. When the kid goes from first period to second period during the passing time, they're free to take their phone out and look at it.
Yeah.
If parents are truly concerned about in-the-moment emergencies, the tried and tested method of calling the school office and saying, I need to speak with my child, such and such has happened, is probably the most effective way, because
Yes.
in situations of true emergency, a severe accident, death, whatever it might be, the school is able to respond to that with a counselor, a social worker, a psychologist to help deliver the message so that the student doesn't read a text message and then have to try to process those emotions on
Right.
their own. So there is, the best way to contact a child during the school day is through the office still. It may not be moment and point in time. If there was ever a crisis that involved the school, when I hear from the law enforcement agencies that I talk to, if everybody has a cell phone and everybody's calling 911, 911 gets jammed up with phone calls, and they're not able to respond to situations as quickly as possible. So by not having the cell phone out, by having straight lines of communication, things seem to work a lot better. So.
I just wanted it to be said again that it's not taking it away completely, it's just during
you.
instructional times.
Glad you did that, because I may not have worded it that way. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Anything else? Greg?
Joe, I just want to echo your comments. I've heard from several students that pretty much said, good luck enforcing that, because it hasn't been in the past, and to this date, I haven't heard any exceptions to that. So I think the staff are doing a great job enforcing this already.
A number of us were at our secondary schools when this practice, it wasn't policy yet, but this practice was discussed. And teachers had a handful of, kind of operational type questions. So what do I do for the first time? What do I do with the second time? But there was no, the resistance to this idea. It was a strongly supported standalone policy. It's always been in policy that you shouldn't have cell phones out during the class period. By being explicit with a single policy, it's definitely helped drive the message forward.
So a big thank you to the staff that are already
Staff are doing a great job of
implementing it. Yep.
Okay, then that one we can bring up at the October board meeting for full reading, full approval after the second reading. And 8531, free and reduced lunch, quite simply added a phrase relative to the breakfasts at some of our schools to indicate, quite simply, at the schools where breakfast is provided because it was a little bit vague, and that's all that was added for clarification. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Excellent. So all of those, Lynn, will be second reading and final. Yeah. Under discussion items, overview of Neola policy updates. Joe, I think that's yours.
Yeah, so as we have discussed in the past, we have a stack of policies that are coming up for review. And tomorrow morning, Richard Zimmern from Neola will be in. Lynn and I will be going through the proposed policy updates. If you remember back, right after the board approved the policy book, we received a stack of policies that needed to be reviewed and revised, and we're going to go into that. One of the areas that we had talked about with Richard, there are some things that that as a board, I think you need to be aware of when it comes down to policy language, certainly because you need to approve it. However, there are some things that are just changes in federal law. And they're things that we can look at as far as a district goes, but, you know, for instance, if it's an FMLA, if it's a Fair Labor Standards Act, those are things that we don't have a whole lot of wiggle room. So going into the next policy committee meeting, those policies, I'm going to separate those from what are policies that we would discuss, such as the staff to board communication policy, just so you can see that they are legally recommended updates. There are things that you need to be aware of, and then take them through approval process that way, because it doesn't, you know, if we want to stay in compliance with the law and those policies, we need to make the changes that are proposed. That is, you know, that might be a slight tweak to how we've done it. Still for 2 readings, still in the packet, still probably bundled, but just something that it requires attention, but not as much debate, for instance, as a staff to board communication policy.
Question, you know, there's several federal agencies that, you know, have practices that they want school districts to follow. Do they inform us of it, or do they send it to the state and the state has to distribute it?
Neola takes care of all of our updates.
But everybody isn't with, I know, Neola for us, but before when there was no Neola, how do we find out?
You were on your own trying to figure out what was there.
Oh,
You'd
my.
maybe get an update, you'd maybe get a legal update from
WASB.
Yeah, the School Board Association
yeah.
would send out an update, and unless you were paying close attention to it, or you had something to, one of the benefits of Neola is they give us proposed policy language to look at. Prior to that, we didn't have that language readily available. We had to request individual policies, or we had to search other districts' websites. That's one of the benefits of being with Neola. For some policies, it's boilerplate federal language. For other policies, such as staff to board communication, it's truly up to what does the school district of Waukesha want that policy to say.
So this item 8, quite simply extracting those that are absolutely, that's the way it's going to be worded. We're just extracting those and putting those in one group, and we will approve those as a group.
Yeah, and when I think, and I mean, I'm just looking at our agenda this evening, you know, a policy as, the policies that are on the agenda tonight, with the exception of free and reduced, or I'm sorry, even free and reduced meals, because we've added local language to that, these are all policies that have a Waukesha flavor to them. But if there was a change in non-discrimination, and that policy were to come forward, you know, the proposed change is really not anything that's truly up for debate, because that language is linked to what the federal government and the Office of Civil Rights is putting out there for us. A change to the Fair Labor Standards Act is something that the federal government is saying, and I just want to be, you know, very clear with you that these are policies that require attention, but they don't require a tremendous amount of debate. I want to then be able to parse out the policies for you that have this language around staff to board communications, personal communication devices in the classroom, so that we're not going from light legal update, we got to do it, to this really requires your attention because you're telling us how to operate as a school system. And then, we'll give that a try for a series to see if it's beneficial. And if it is, great. If it's not, then, we'll adjust back to how we've done it with HR series, business series, instructional series, and how we've tackled this last series of it.
One of the advantages of doing that was we get some of that stuff out of the way rather than waiting to go through it by department.
And correct. I mean, some of those are time sensitive, change to food service. Right now, I believe the state legislature is debating the budget still and looking at possible budget changes. Oftentimes in the state budget, there's changes that happen to how school districts operate, as far as education, and we have time-sensitive changes. So there's a chance that during the October board meeting, policy meeting, I may have a policy in front of you that requests waiving the reading practice, 1 reading, 2 readings, just because it's time sensitive and needs to be on the books by November 1, by December 1. So, and I anticipate that that's coming.
Okay. Under other business, we have any requests from you for recommendations for something that needs to be at a future meeting?
I don't have anything for future committee meetings, but as we've updated policy, Chris Hedstrom keeps a memo to staff about all board meetings. So if the board approves a series of policies at the meeting, in her weekly blog to staff, it'll say policy, number, and then this was the policy that was changed. In practice in the district, that policy has been adjusted, but the practice in reality is it takes Neola a few weeks to update the website based off of the number of policies that we send in. A way for us to get the proposed language out there is to utilize board docs to its fullest extent. And I'm not proposing that we get away from a paper packet, because Sue Ettinger can still put a paper packet together. That's not a proposed change. But if we make public that packet minus all of the confidential stuff that perhaps would need to be discussed in an executive session, we're able to say, these are the policies that are changed, and the proposed policy language is listed in board docs, so then that stuff is access to staff in our community. It is not hard to set up. We already have board docs as a district because that's where all of our policies are currently listed. So I'm bringing that to you as a committee just to think about, discuss. We can use it, we can add it as an agenda item for future consideration, if that's what the committee would like to do, or just implement it as a matter of how we do business
So,
after you think about it.
The current way we're doing this is basically a broadcast from Chris. And what you're talking about is like, a little bit more specific about it by putting it in the documents. Now, when we approve a policy at the full board meeting after the second reading, does that policy go into effect immediately? Yes, it does. Okay, so that, and the problem is, Neola won't necessarily get it in for a couple of weeks, so we, so we really want that to be available to somebody to read that morning.
And Lynn, for our administration in the district, they all have an access code to get into board docs so they can see what's been updated.
Okay.
But we don't have a password for all staff and for the community. I mean, it's just that it's cumbersome to set up. The workaround is to use the public board docs access point where you can look up, agendas and minutes from board meetings and see where that packet is. And it's just a matter of uploading that information electronically into there.
Okay.
And again, it doesn't, if you prefer a paper packet from Sue, it doesn't take away what the board would experience. It would just allow us then to publicize things to our staff and to our community. And so they would see, for instance, how policy 8531, where you see the underlined at schools where breakfast is provided, they would be able to see and reference that is the added language.
Okay. Sounds appropriate. Any other recommendations for future board meetings? Great, excuse me.
We would time it so that the day that your packets would go out, the public would not, clarify this. The public would not get the information before the board got the information.
Right.
With the exception of if you don't open your board packet until the, 5 minutes before the meeting starts, then you're putting yourself as a board member behind what the public would know about the agenda.
And we have our next meeting scheduled for October 3rd. Wait, is that right? No. I'm sorry, that's the CNI meeting,
17.
17th. We stand adjourned. Thank you.